Here's a few minutes of a conversation between Douglas Murray and Ben Shapiro. This conversation touches on what I think might be the most dangerous and the most terrifying part of everything that's been happening since October 7th. And in a way that it's kind of almost not quite spoken about, at least so explicitly in terms of just how bad it is. Let's have a listen.
People say, well, why are you so bothered about Israel? And I hear that from the right. The left don't care. They know I'm beyond saving. But on the right, I hear that. And I think they don't realize, they think it's some weird thing. Like, what is this small state? Why does it bother you? I don't think they've even remotely reflected on what I regard as the deepest reasons to care. It seems to me, if, as you well know, Western civilization is based on the legacy of Athens and Jerusalem. Athens is under great assault always, but it's not actually under existential assault at the moment. What is being attempted by Israel's enemies is the philosophical and cultural equivalent of burning all the libraries of Alexandria. This is one of the underpinnings of Western civilization, utterly, utterly at risk. And not in a sort of metaphorical way where people might use it as a sort of book subtitle, but the real thing. I mean, I've sometimes thought about it this way. I haven't tried this out in public before. How many Jews are there in the world?
15 million.
15 million. Okay. This may come across really coarse, but let me put it this way. I mean, there are lots of conflicts in the world, and I've covered a lot of conflicts involving a lot of people, but it's conceivable that at some point 15 million Christians could be killed. It would be a disaster, a tragedy. It's conceivable that at some point, Burma, India, somewhere, 15 million Muslims could be killed. It would be a disaster. It would be a tragedy of an unimaginable scale, of mid-20th century scale. But if 15 million Jews were killed, that's the end of the story. That's it. Now, what does that mean for the Jewish people? It's the end, that the people who saw off everyone from Pharaoh to Hitler disappeared in the 21st century. Everyone else, in my view, wouldn't survive either. Western civilization could not survive the destruction of the Jewish state because it would be, among much else, the cutting away of the whole tree that we're on, and Western civilization would die. So I regard the existential threat against the Jewish people to not just be about the Jewish people. It matters deeply to me that it is about the Jewish people. But it also matters to me because it's about America. Could America survive if the Jewish people were no more on its watch, or everybody was forcibly deported from the Holy Land? Come on. Of course not. Could the isolationists bear the repercussions of that across the Middle East and elsewhere? Of course not. So I find this blitheness and the frivolity of it to be absolutely intolerable among the critics on the right.
You know, one of the things that's been so amazing about all of this is just the sense that the West has lost its moorings. I mean, I was more disturbed, from a sort of Jewish perspective as a Jew. Tragedies happen to the Jews, terrorist attacks happen to Jews, slaughters happen to Jews. This is sort of the story of Jewish history. But the idea that you have hundreds of thousands of Westerners who are marching in solidarity with the murderers, that was on some level more disturbing to me than the actual massacre itself. Certainly not in terms of the actual amount of human suffering and the horrifying evil and barbarity of it. But in terms of the threat to the civilization as a whole, it seems to me that one of the things that we're seeing in terms of this sort of right-wing backlash that's now happening in Europe, it's very much of a piece with that. It's very much Europe and I'm hoping America saying, if we don't have any values for us to rely upon, then the people who are marching through the streets are going to end up running this place.
So Douglas starts out making, talking about the fact that attacks against the Jews have historically, invariably, always been a harbinger of something, of a downfall to come for the wider society, always. And he talks about and really elaborates on the cost to Western society at large that would, the cost that Western society would pay, God forbid, for, if the worst were to happen as he describes it. And I mean, the cost for Western society would be decimation. It would be the end of Western society. But, attacks against Jews are nothing new. Unfortunately, it's nothing, it is what it is. I mean, of course, attacks against Jews are terrible and sad, and the possibility of them happening again is scary and dangerous, and we can and should do whatever we can to protect against them. But it's nothing new. It's nothing uniquely terrifying, right? The Crusades, the Inquisition, the fast forward Holocaust, pogroms, all of the wars that the entire Arab Middle East has waged against Jews in Israel for over nearly a century. There's nothing new and nothing particularly uniquely terrifying about it. It's a very big threat, but the way that the youth of the Western world have been co-opted and been so clearly, deeply and effectively gaslit into loudly and proudly carrying and standing up for these completely, entirely and radically anti-Semitic positions and narratives, that's terrifying. That's terrifying because it's new, and these are the youth. These are the future of the West. And, God forbid if this were to continue along this trajectory where a huge proportion of the youth have been, frankly, completely brainwashed into thinking that what they have been too deeply gaslit to recognize as blatant, dangerous, horrific anti-Semitism, and they think that it's virtuous. This is really terrifying. It's something new over the past several decades at least, but this is something that God forbid, I don't even want to say out of my mouth what the potential future of that resembles. And I guess it's a good thing that, the prestige of the world of academia and universities is starting to crumble, because they're in a very large part responsible for this, and that the corporate media are absolutely crumbling, which is an absolute blessing, because they're also very much have had a huge role to play in creating this, pseudo-virtuous anti-Semitic attitude. And, the development of that attitude and that trajectory is something that is really, really dangerous and really, really terrifying. And thank God for the downfall of corporate media and the ivory tower academia, because they're both complicit in creating a generation of people who believe that violent, genocidal anti-Semitism is virtuous.